Mark loved his boat. It wasn't fancy, just a small fishing boat he'd named the Happy Clam. Every weekend, Mark would wake up early, grab his fishing gear, and head out to the lake. He loved the peace and quiet of being on the water, the gentle rocking of the boat, and the thrill of catching a fish. Mark lived in a neat, tidy neighborhood called Sunny Acres. The houses all looked the same, with green lawns and carefully trimmed hedges. Sunny Acres had a homeowners association, or HOA, that made sure everyone followed the rules. Most of the rules were okay, like keeping your grass cut and your house painted. But some of the rules were a bit much, especially when it came to boats. The HOA rules said you could only park your boat in your driveway for a few hours to load or unload it. You couldn't store it there permanently. Mark understood the rule. He didn't want the neighborhood to look like a boat storage yard. So, he always kept the Happy Clam in his garage when he wasn't using it. It was a bit of a hassle, but Mark followed the rules. He liked living in Sunny Acres, and he didn't want any trouble. He worked hard as a computer programmer, sitting at a desk all day. His boat was his escape, his way to relax and enjoy nature. He spent hours tinkering with the engine, cleaning the hull, and making sure everything was perfect. The Happy Clam was more than just a boat to Mark, it was his happy place. Sometimes, Mark would invite his friends and neighbors out on the boat. They'd go fishing, water skiing, or just cruise around the lake, enjoying the sunshine and the fresh air. Everyone loved the Happy Clam, and Mark was always happy to share it. He believed that life was better when you shared your joy with others. He tried to be a good neighbor, always willing to lend a hand or offer a smile. He waved to people as he drove down the street and helped Mrs. Gable carry her groceries inside. He was just a friendly, helpful guy who loved his boat and his neighborhood. He just wanted to live in peace and enjoy his life. Little did he know, that peace was about to be disturbed. Sunny Acres was the kind of place where everything looked perfect, almost too perfect. The lawns were always green, the flowers were always blooming, and the houses were always spotless. This wasn't by accident. It was all thanks to the Sunny Acres Homeowners Association, or HOA. The HOA had rules for everything, from the color of your mailbox to the height of your grass. They even had rules about what kind of holiday decorations you could put up and when you had to take them down. Some people loved the HOA because it kept the neighborhood looking nice. Others thought it was too strict and that it took away people's freedom to express themselves. Mark was somewhere in the middle. He understood the need for some rules, but he also thought the HOA could be a bit over the top sometimes. The HOA was run by a board of directors, who were elected by the homeowners. They were the ones who made the rules and enforced them. The president of the HOA was a woman named Karen. Karen took her job very seriously. Some might even say too seriously. She lived at number 12, Sunny Lane, right across the street from Mark. Her house was always perfectly manicured, and she made sure everyone else's was too. One of the strictest rules in Sunny Acres was about parking. You weren't allowed to park your car on the street overnight. Everyone had to park in their garage or driveway. This was to keep the streets clear and prevent congestion. The HOA also had rules about what kind of vehicles you could park in your driveway. Commercial vehicles, like trucks with company logos, were not allowed. And, of course, there were the boat rules, which Mark knew all too well. The HOA sent out newsletters every month, reminding everyone of the rules and announcing any changes. They also held regular meetings where homeowners could voice their concerns and make suggestions. Karen always ran the meetings, and she made sure everything was done according to the rules. She had a very commanding presence, and she wasn't afraid to speak her mind. Some people found her intimidating, but others admired her for her dedication to the community. Mark just tried to stay out of her way and follow the rules. He figured it was the easiest way to avoid trouble. But trouble, as he would soon discover, was heading his way regardless. Karen, the HOA president, was a force to be reckoned with. She was a tall, thin woman with short, perfectly styled blonde hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through you. She always wore impeccably tailored suits and carried a clipboard with her everywhere she went. The clipboard was her weapon, filled with notes about rule infractions and complaints. She had lived in Sunny Acres for over 20 years and had been the HOA president for the last 10. In that time, she had transformed the neighborhood into her own personal paradise, or at least, that's how she saw it. Everyone else just saw a place with way too many rules. Karen genuinely believed she was doing what was best for the community. She wanted Sunny Acres to be the best neighborhood in the whole city, and she was willing to do whatever it took to achieve that goal. Even if it meant making a few enemies along the way. She had a reputation for being difficult and uncompromising. If you broke a rule, you could be sure that Karen would find out about it and you would receive a sternly worded letter in the mail. She never let anything slide. Some people said she enjoyed catching people breaking the rules. But Karen wasn't just strict, she was also very powerful. As the HOA president, she had the authority to fine homeowners, issue warnings, and even take legal action if necessary. She used this power sparingly, but she wasn't afraid to use it when she felt it was necessary. The boat rules were a particular point of interest for Karen. She didn't like boats. She thought they were unsightly and took up too much space. She especially didn't like Mark's boat. She thought it was old and rusty and that it lowered the property values of the neighborhood. She had been watching Mark for a while, looking for any excuse to write him up for a violation. She had noticed that he sometimes left his boat in the driveway for a few minutes longer than allowed. She had also noticed that he sometimes parked it a little too close to the sidewalk. These were minor infractions, but Karen didn't care. She was determined to find something, anything, to get Mark in trouble. She saw him as a threat to her perfect vision of Sunny Acres, and she wasn't going to let him get away with it. The stage was set for a showdown, and Mark was completely unaware of the storm brewing right across the street. The first incident was about the weeds. Mark was usually very good about keeping his yard tidy, but he had been busy with work lately and had let a few weeds grow in his flower beds. Karen spotted them during one of her daily patrols and immediately sent him a notice. The notice stated that he had 48 hours to remove the weeds or he would be fined $50. Mark was annoyed, but he knew he was in the wrong. He spent the next evening pulling weeds until his back ached. He made sure to get every last one, just to avoid any further trouble with Karen. The second incident was about the color of his mailbox. Mark's mailbox was a standard black mailbox, the same as everyone else's in the neighborhood. But Karen decided that black was too drab and that everyone should have a mailbox that was a more cheerful color. She sent out a notice requiring everyone to paint their mailboxes a shade of light gray. Mark thought this was ridiculous. He liked his black mailbox, and he didn't see why he should have to paint it gray. But he knew that arguing with Karen was pointless. So, he went to the store, bought a can of light gray paint, and painted his mailbox. The third incident was the most absurd of all. Karen claimed that Mark's lawn was not green enough. She said that it was a slightly different shade of green than the other lawns in the neighborhood and that it was making the whole street look uneven. She demanded that Mark resod his entire lawn with a specific type of grass that she had approved. This was the last straw for Mark. He was tired of Karen's constant nitpicking and her ridiculous rules. He decided to stand up to her. He went to the next HOA meeting and confronted her about her unfair treatment of him. "Karen," he said, "I'm tired of you picking on me. I follow the rules, but you're always finding something to complain about. It's not fair." Karen just smiled smugly. "Mr. Thompson," she said, "I am simply enforcing the rules of the HOA. If you don't like the rules, you are free to move." The other homeowners at the meeting shifted uncomfortably. They knew that Karen was being unreasonable, but they were afraid to speak out against her. Mark felt a surge of anger. He knew he couldn't win an argument with Karen, but he wasn't going to let her bully him anymore. The feud had officially begun, and Mark wasn't backing down. The happy clam, it seemed, was sailing into troubled waters. Mark woke up early on Saturday morning, excited for a day of fishing. He grabbed his coffee and headed outside, eager to hitch the Happy Clam to his truck. But as he approached his driveway, his heart sank. The space where his boat usually sat was empty. The Happy Clam was gone. He blinked, thinking he must be dreaming. He rubbed his eyes and looked again. The boat was definitely gone. Panic started to set in. Had someone stolen his boat? Who would do such a thing? He ran back inside and frantically searched for his boat keys, thinking maybe he had moved it and forgotten. But the keys were right where he always kept them. He checked his garage, just in case. Empty. The Happy Clam was nowhere to be found. He called the police and reported the boat stolen. The officer who took the report was sympathetic, but he warned Mark that stolen boats were often difficult to recover. He promised to keep an eye out for it, but he didn't sound optimistic. Mark felt a wave of despair wash over him. The Happy Clam wasn't just a boat, it was his escape, his happy place. Now it was gone, and he didn't know if he would ever see it again. As he stood in his driveway, staring at the empty space, his gaze fell on Karen's house across the street. He noticed that her curtains were twitching. Was she watching him? A sudden thought struck him. Could Karen have something to do with this? He knew it sounded crazy, but he couldn't shake the feeling that she was involved. She had been so hostile towards him lately, and she had made it clear that she didn't like his boat. Could she have actually stolen it? It seemed unbelievable, but with Karen, anything was possible. He decided to confront her. He walked across the street and rang her doorbell. Karen answered the door with a surprised look on her face. "Mr. Thompson," she said, "what a surprise. What can I do for you?" "My boat is gone, Karen," Mark said, his voice trembling with anger. "It was stolen last night. Did you have anything to do with it?" Karen's eyes widened in feigned innocence. "Mr. Thompson, I am shocked that you would accuse me of such a thing. I would never steal your boat." But Mark didn't believe her. He could see the guilt in her eyes. "Don't lie to me, Karen," he said. "I know you don't like my boat. Did you have it taken away?" Karen scoffed. "That is a ridiculous accusation. I suggest you contact the police and stop bothering me." She slammed the door in his face. Mark stood there for a moment, stunned. He knew that Karen was lying, but he didn't have any proof. He felt helpless and frustrated. He knew he had to find a way to prove that Karen was behind the theft of his boat. He just didn't know how. The mystery of the missing Happy Clam had begun, and Mark was determined to solve it. The police told Mark that without any evidence, there wasn't much they could do immediately. They would patrol the area, check pawn shops, and run the boat's registration number, but Mark felt like he needed to do more. He couldn't just sit around and wait. The Happy Clam was too important to him. He decided to start his own investigation. He began by talking to his neighbors, hoping someone had seen something suspicious. Most of them were sympathetic, but no one had witnessed anything unusual the night before. Old Mrs. Gable, who lived next door, said she had heard a truck driving away late at night, but she hadn't paid much attention to it. She thought it was just a delivery truck. Mark pressed her for more details, but she couldn't remember anything specific. Disappointed, Mark continued his search. He walked around the neighborhood, looking for any clues that might lead him to his boat. He checked for tire tracks, broken glass, or anything out of the ordinary. As he walked, he noticed a security camera mounted on the corner of Mr. Henderson's house, 2 doors down from his own. Mr. Henderson was a tech-savvy guy who had installed the camera to protect his property. Mark wondered if the camera might have captured something the night his boat was stolen. He went to Mr. Henderson's door and explained his situation. Mr. Henderson was happy to help. He pulled up the security footage from the previous night and they started watching it together. For hours, they watched cars and people pass by on the street. Most of the footage was uneventful. But then, around 2 a.m., they saw something interesting. A dark-colored pickup truck drove slowly past Mark's house. It paused for a moment in front of his driveway, and then drove off. The camera wasn't clear enough to identify the truck or the driver, but Mark had a hunch. He recognized the truck. It looked just like the one that Karen's son, Kevin, drove. Kevin was a surly young man who was always getting into trouble. Mark had seen him around the neighborhood a few times, and he knew that Kevin and Karen were very close. Could Kevin have stolen his boat on Karen's orders? It seemed more and more likely. Mark thanked Mr. Henderson for his help and rushed home, his mind racing. He now had a solid lead, but he needed more evidence to prove that Karen and Kevin were behind the theft. He decided to pay Kevin a visit. It was a risky move, but Mark was desperate to get his boat back. He felt like he was finally getting closer to solving the mystery of the missing happy clam. He just hoped he wasn't walking into a trap. Kevin lived in a small apartment above a pizza place on the other side of town. Mark drove there, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. He was nervous, but determined. He parked his truck and took a deep breath before heading up the stairs to Kevin's apartment. He knocked on the door. After a moment, Kevin opened it, a scowl on his face. "What do you want?" he growled. "I want to talk to you about my boat," Mark said, standing his ground. Kevin's eyes narrowed. "I don't know anything about your boat," he said, trying to shut the door. Mark put his foot in the doorway, preventing Kevin from closing it. "I saw your truck on Mr. Henderson's security camera last night," he said. "It was driving past my house around 2 a.m. My boat was stolen that night. I think you know something about it." Kevin hesitated for a moment, then sighed. "Okay, fine," he said. "I was driving around last night. So what? That doesn't mean I stole your stupid boat. Where were you going?" Mark asked, pressing him. "Nowhere," Kevin said defensively. "I was just driving around. Trying to clear my head." Mark didn't believe him. He could tell that Kevin was hiding something. "Look," he said, "I just want my boat back. If you tell me where it is, I promise I won't press charges. I just want this to be over." Kevin looked conflicted. He glanced around nervously, as if afraid someone was listening. "I can't tell you anything," he said finally. "I don't know anything." "Is your mother involved in this?" Mark asked, his voice low. Kevin's eyes flashed with anger. "Leave my mother out of this," he shouted. "Just get out of here and leave me alone." He slammed the door in Mark's face. Mark stood there for a moment, feeling defeated. He had hoped that Kevin would confess, but he had gotten nowhere. He knew that Karen was somehow involved, but he still didn't have any solid proof. As he turned to leave, he noticed something out of the corner of his eye. A small piece of rope was lying on the ground near Kevin's door. It looked like a piece of boat rope. Mark picked it up and examined it closely. It was the same type of rope he used to tie down the happy clam. His heart leaped with excitement. This was it. This was the evidence he needed. He carefully put the rope in his pocket and headed back to his truck. He knew what he had to do. He had to go back to the police and tell them everything he had learned. He had a feeling that the mystery of the missing happy clam was about to be solved. He just hoped it wasn't too late. The tide was turning, and Karen's carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down. Mark rushed to the police station, eager to share his findings. He told the officer at the front desk everything, about Karen's animosity towards his boat, about the security footage of Kevin's truck, and about the piece of rope he found outside Kevin's apartment. The officer listened patiently, but he seemed skeptical. "Mr. Thompson," he said, "I understand you're upset about your boat, but this is all circumstantial evidence. We can't just arrest someone based on a hunch and a piece of rope." Mark was frustrated. "But what about the security footage? What about the fact that Karen hates my boat? Isn't that enough to at least investigate?" The officer sighed. "We'll look into it, Mr. Thompson," he said. "We'll talk to Kevin and Karen and see what they have to say. But I can't promise you anything. Without more evidence, there's not much we can do." Mark left the police station feeling discouraged. He had hoped that the police would take his suspicions seriously, but they seemed unwilling to get involved without concrete proof. He knew he had to find more evidence if he wanted to get his boat back and bring Karen to justice. He decided to continue his investigation, focusing on Karen. He knew that she was the mastermind behind the theft, and he was determined to uncover her plan. He started by talking to other neighbors, hoping to find someone who had witnessed something suspicious or who knew something about Karen's activities. He learned that Karen had been acting strangely lately. She had been spending a lot of time on the phone, talking in hushed tones. She had also been seen driving around in her car late at night. Some neighbors had even noticed a strange van parked outside her house on several occasions. Mark also discovered that Karen had a history of getting into trouble with the HOA. She had been accused of misusing HOA funds and of making decisions that benefited herself and her friends. Some people even suspected her of tampering with election results to stay in power. The more Mark learned about Karen, the more convinced he became that she was capable of anything. He knew that she was a ruthless and ambitious woman who would stop at nothing to get what she wanted. He just needed to find the evidence to prove it. He decided to stake out Karen's house, hoping to catch her in the act. He knew it was a long shot, but he was desperate. The happy clam was still missing, and Mark wasn't giving up until he found it. The game was afoot, and Mark was determined to win. Mark sat in his truck, parked a block away from Karen's house, watching. He had brought a thermos of coffee and a bag of chips to keep him going. Hours passed, but nothing seemed to be happening. Karen's house remained dark and quiet. Just as Mark was about to give up for the night, he saw a flicker of movement. The garage door slowly began to open. Mark's heart raced. He grabbed his binoculars and focused on the garage. A figure emerged from the garage, pushing something large and bulky. Mark squinted through the binoculars. It was Karen. And she was pushing a boat. Mark couldn't believe his eyes. It was the happy clam. Karen had been hiding his boat in her garage all along. He watched as she struggled to maneuver the boat out of the garage and into the driveway. She then signaled to someone inside the garage, and Kevin emerged, helping her to position the boat onto a trailer attached to a different truck than the one seen on the video. This one was white. Mark realized what was happening. Karen and Kevin were planning to move the happy clam to a new location, probably somewhere where it would never be found. He had to stop them. He jumped out of his truck and started running towards Karen's house, shouting, "Stop! Thief!" Karen and Kevin froze, startled by Mark's sudden appearance. They looked at each other in panic. Karen quickly jumped into the white truck and started the engine. Kevin scrambled into the passenger seat. Mark reached the driveway just as Karen put the truck in gear. He lunged forward, trying to grab the trailer, but he was too late. The truck sped away, pulling the happy clam behind it. Mark watched in disbelief as Karen and Kevin disappeared down the street, taking his boat with them. He felt a surge of anger and frustration. He had been so close to catching them, but they had managed to escape. He knew he couldn't let them get away with it. He jumped back into his truck and started chasing after them. He followed them through the streets of Sunny Acres, determined to catch them and get his boat back. As he chased after Karen and Kevin, he noticed something strange. A convoy of black SUVs was following them as well. Mark wondered who they were and what they wanted. Were they friends of Karen? Or were they something else entirely? He had a feeling that the situation was about to become even more complicated. The chase was on, and Mark was caught in the middle of something much bigger than he had ever imagined. The mystery of the happy clam was about to take a very unexpected turn. The chase ended abruptly when Karen and Kevin pulled into a deserted warehouse on the outskirts of town. Mark, still following closely, watched as the black SUVs surrounded the warehouse. Men in dark suits emerged from the SUVs, carrying what looked like FBI badges. Mark was stunned. What was the FBI doing here? Was Karen involved in something much bigger than just stealing his boat? He watched as the FBI agents approached Karen and Kevin, who looked terrified. The agent spoke to them briefly, then led them inside the warehouse. Mark decided to stay put and see what happened next. He parked his truck a safe distance away and waited. Hours passed, but nothing seemed to be happening. The warehouse remained dark and quiet. The next morning, Mark woke up to a commotion in Sunny Acres. He looked out his window and saw a fleet of black SUVs parked in front of Karen's house. FBI agents were swarming all over her property, carrying boxes and equipment. Mark couldn't believe his eyes. The FBI was raiding Karen's house. He grabbed his coffee and ran outside to see what was going on. Neighbors were gathering on the street, watching the scene in disbelief. Mrs. Gable was shaking her head in amazement. "I always knew there was something fishy about that woman," she said. Mark approached one of the FBI agents and asked what was happening. The agent couldn't give him any details, but he did say that they were executing a search warrant and that Karen was being investigated for multiple federal crimes. Mark felt a surge of relief. It seemed that his suspicions about Karen were correct. She was involved in something much bigger than just stealing his boat. But what could she have done to attract the attention of the FBI? As he watched the agents carry boxes of evidence out of Karen's house, he couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Justice was finally being served. The carefully constructed world of Karen, the HOA president, was about to crumble. But the mystery of the happy clam was far from over. Mark still didn't know where his boat was, and he was determined to find it. He had a feeling that the FBI raid was just the beginning of a long and complicated investigation. He knew that he had to stay involved if he wanted to get his boat back and make sure that Karen was brought to justice. The next chapter was about to begin, and Mark was ready for whatever it might bring. He hoped the tide would turn and the happy clam would sail home safely. The FBI agents were meticulous in their search of Karen's house. They moved through each room with a purpose, carefully examining every nook and cranny. Some agents were dusting for fingerprints, while others were photographing documents and electronic devices. In the living room, agents meticulously searched through Karen's collection of porcelain dolls, carefully lifting each one and examining the shelves behind them. They took apart the fireplace, searching for hidden compartments. They even checked inside the piano, running their fingers along the keys and examining the sounding board. In the kitchen, agents emptied the cabinets and drawers, carefully inspecting every item. They opened the refrigerator and freezer, removing all the food and examining the shelves and compartments. They searched through the pantry, checking every can and box. The garage was the focus of intense scrutiny. Agents used special equipment to scan the walls and floors, looking for hidden rooms or tunnels. They took apart Karen's car, searching for contraband. They even brought in a dog trained to sniff out drugs and explosives. Upstairs, agents searched through Karen's bedrooms, examining her closets, drawers, and dressers. They looked under the beds and behind the furniture. They even checked inside the mattresses, using knives to cut them open. In Karen's office, agents spent hours poring over her financial records, bank statements, and computer files. They searched for evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. They interviewed Karen's accountant and her lawyer, trying to piece together her financial dealings. The atmosphere in Sunny Acres was electric. Neighbors watched with bated breath as the FBI agents continued their search, wondering what they would find next. Rumors flew through the neighborhood like wildfire. Some people said that Karen was involved in a vast criminal conspiracy. Others said that she was a Russian spy. The truth was probably somewhere in between. As the sun began to set, the FBI agents began to wrap up their search. They had filled several boxes with evidence, including documents, electronic devices, and cash. They loaded the boxes into their SUVs and prepared to leave. Before they left, one of the agents approached Mark. "Mr. Thompson," he said, "we may need your assistance with this investigation. We'll be in touch." Mark nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. He was glad that Karen was finally being brought to justice, but he was also worried about what the future might hold. The mystery of the Happy Clam was still unsolved, and Mark knew that he had to keep searching for his boat. He just hoped that the FBI raid would lead him one step closer to finding it. The next clue awaited, hidden somewhere in the chaos. The next day, Mark received a call from the FBI. They asked him to come to Karen's house to identify some property. He arrived to find the agent still on the scene, sifting through the remaining items. One of the agents led Mark to the garage. "Mr. Thompson," he said, "we found something we think you should see." The agent gestured towards a large pile of boxes and tarps in the corner of the garage. The agents removed the tarps, revealing the Happy Clam. Mark's heart leaped with joy. There it was, his beloved boat, hidden away in Karen's garage. He ran his hand along the hull, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. "That's it," he exclaimed. "That's my boat." The agent smiled. "We also found some other interesting items in the garage," he said. He pointed to a stack of boxes filled with documents, cash, and electronic devices. "These appear to be related to some of the other crimes Ms. Karen is being investigated for," the agent explained. "We found evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. It seems that she was using her position as HOA president to enrich herself and her associates." Mark was shocked but not entirely surprised. He had always suspected that Karen was up to no good, but he never imagined that she was involved in such serious crimes. The agent continued, "We also found a hidden compartment in the garage wall. Inside, we discovered a large amount of cash, several fake IDs, and a detailed plan for stealing money from the HOA." Mark shook his head in disbelief. Karen's scheme was even more elaborate than he had imagined. He realized that stealing his boat was just a small part of her larger criminal enterprise. "Mr. Thompson," the agent said, "your boat was instrumental in helping us uncover this whole operation. Thank you for your persistence and your willingness to help us with this investigation." Mark smiled. "I'm just glad I could help," he said. "And I'm even happier to have my boat back." The agent arranged for the Happy Clam to be returned to Mark. As he watched his boat being towed away, he felt a sense of closure. The mystery of the missing Happy Clam was finally solved, and Karen's reign of terror in Sunny Acres was over. But the story didn't end there. The legal battles were just beginning, and Mark knew that he would have to testify against Karen in court. He was ready to do whatever it took to ensure that she was brought to justice. The tide had turned for good. The FBI agents escorted Karen out of her house in handcuffs. A crowd of neighbors had gathered on the street, watching in stunned silence. Karen, who was usually so composed and in control, looked disheveled and defeated. Her perfectly styled blonde hair was a mess, and her tailored suit was rumpled. As she was led to the FBI car, she glared at Mark, her eyes filled with hatred. "This isn't over, Thompson," she spat. "You'll pay for this." Mark just shook his head, feeling a mixture of pity and contempt for Karen. She had brought this on herself. Her greed and ambition had led her down a path of destruction, and now she was facing the consequences. The FBI agents placed Karen in the back of the car and drove away. The crowd of neighbors remained on the street, buzzing with excitement and disbelief. Some people were taking pictures with their phones, while others were gossiping about Karen's crimes. Mrs. Gable approached Mark, a mischievous grin on her face. Well, she said. "Looks like the HOA president is finally getting what she deserves." Mark chuckled. "Yeah, it looks that way," he said. "I guess Sunny Acres will be a little less sunny for a while." As the news of Karen's arrest spread throughout the neighborhood, people began to celebrate. They threw a block party, complete with music, food, and dancing. They even made a giant bonfire and burned all of Karen's HOA notices. The atmosphere in Sunny Acres was transformed. The tension and fear that had been hanging over the neighborhood for so long were finally gone. People were laughing, smiling, and talking to each other. It was as if a dark cloud had been lifted from their lives. But amidst all the celebration, Mark couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. He knew that Karen's arrest was just the beginning of a long and complicated legal battle. He also knew that Karen was a dangerous woman who was capable of anything. He had to be prepared for whatever she might do next. He also knew Kevin was still out there somewhere. The celebration continued late into the night, but Mark decided to go home early. He wanted to be alone with his thoughts and prepare for the challenges that lay ahead. As he walked towards his house, he couldn't help but smile. He had finally gotten his boat back, and he had helped bring Karen to justice. It was a good day, despite everything. But tomorrow was another day, and Mark knew he had to be ready for whatever it might bring. He looked forward to taking the happy clam out on the lake again, a symbol of his restored peace. The seeds of Karen's actions had been sown long ago. It wasn't just about the boat, it was about power, control, and a deep-seated jealousy that had festered for years. Years ago, Karen had dreamed of a life on the lake. She had saved up enough money to buy a small cabin and a used boat, envisioning peaceful weekends spent fishing and enjoying the tranquility of the water. But then, disaster struck. A sudden illness drained her savings, forcing her to sell the cabin and abandon her dream. She resented the fact that others could enjoy what she had lost. When Mark moved into Sunny Acres with his boat, it triggered something inside her. She saw his happiness as a personal affront, a constant reminder of her own failed dreams. But the boat was just the beginning. As HOA president, Karen had access to the community's finances. At first, it was just small amounts, a little here and a little there, to cover unforeseen expenses. But as her confidence grew, so did the amounts she was taking. She justified her actions by telling herself that she deserved it. She worked hard to maintain the neighborhood's pristine appearance, and she felt that she was entitled to some compensation. She used the stolen money to pay for expensive clothes, lavish vacations, and cosmetic surgery. Kevin, her son, was also involved in the scheme. He was always getting into trouble and needed money to pay for his legal fees and other expenses. Karen used HOA funds to bail him out of jail and to pay off his debts. The stolen boat was initially intended to be a simple act of spite, a way to get back at Mark for flaunting his happiness. But as Karen's criminal activities escalated, the boat became a bargaining chip. She planned to sell it and use the money to cover her tracks. But the FBI investigation threw a wrench in her plans. She panicked and tried to move the boat to a new location, hoping to avoid detection. But Mark's stakeout foiled her attempt, leading to her arrest and the unraveling of her entire criminal empire. Karen's story was a cautionary tale about the dangers of greed, envy, and the abuse of power. She had started out with good intentions, wanting to make Sunny Acres a better place. But her ambition had consumed her, leading her down a path of corruption and destruction. The desire for perfection had destroyed her. And now, she was paying the price. The lake, it seemed, would remain a distant dream. Seeing the happy clam safely back in his driveway brought a wave of relief to Mark. He spent the afternoon cleaning and polishing the boat, making sure it was in perfect condition for its first voyage back on the lake. He replaced the rope that had been found at Kevin's, and he gave the engine a thorough checkup. As he worked, he couldn't help but smile. He had gone through a lot in the past few weeks, but he had finally come out on top. He had stood up to a bully, uncovered a criminal conspiracy, and gotten his boat back. He felt a sense of vindication, knowing that his persistence and determination had paid off. The next morning, Mark woke up early, eager to get back on the water. He hitched the happy clam to his truck and drove to the lake. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and the air was fresh and clean. It was a perfect day for fishing. As he launched the boat into the water, he took a deep breath and savored the moment. The happy clam glided smoothly across the lake, its engine humming contentment. Mark felt a sense of peace and tranquility wash over him. He spent the day fishing, catching several large bass. He didn't keep them, though. He released them back into the water, feeling a sense of gratitude for the abundance of nature. As the sun began to set, Mark steered the happy clam back to shore. He felt refreshed and rejuvenated, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. He knew that the legal battle with Karen was far from over, but he was confident that justice would prevail. He also knew that he had made a difference in Sunny Acres. The neighborhood was now a more open and friendly place, free from the tyranny of Karen's HOA. People were working together to create a better community, one where everyone felt welcome and valued. Mark parked the happy clam back in his driveway, feeling a sense of pride and accomplishment. He had not only gotten his boat back but had also helped to make his neighborhood a better place. He knew that he would never forget the events of the past few weeks, but he was ready to move on and enjoy his life to the fullest. The happy clam, once a source of conflict, was now a symbol of his victory and his renewed sense of peace. He smiled, knowing that the best days were yet to come. The open water beckoned. The HOA was in complete disarray. With Karen gone, there was no one to enforce the rules or organize the meetings. The remaining board members were overwhelmed and unsure of what to do. The HOA funds were frozen pending the FBI investigation, leaving the neighborhood without the resources to maintain the common areas. Weeds sprouted in the flower beds, lawns went unmowed, and the swimming pool turned green. Sunny Acres, once a picture of pristine perfection, began to look neglected and run down. But amidst the chaos, a new sense of community began to emerge. Neighbors started working together to clean up the neighborhood. They organized volunteer workdays, mowing lawns, pulling weeds, and cleaning the pool. They even started a community garden, where they grew fresh fruits and vegetables. The HOA also underwent a major transformation. The old board members resigned, and a new election was held. Mark was encouraged to run for president, but he declined. He didn't want to be in charge again. He just wanted to live in peace and enjoy his boat. Instead, he nominated Mrs. Gable, the sweet old lady who lived next door. She was kind, fair, and respected by everyone in the neighborhood. Mrs. Gable agreed to run, and she was elected by a landslide. Under Mrs. Gable's leadership, the HOA became much more democratic and transparent. She made sure that everyone had a voice in the decision-making process. She also relaxed some of the stricter rules, allowing people to express themselves and enjoy their properties without fear of being fined. The boat rules were completely abolished. People were now allowed to park their boats in their driveways for as long as they wanted. Mark was thrilled. He no longer had to worry about hiding the happy clam in his garage. The HOA also started using its funds to support local charities and community initiatives. They organized food drives, clothing drives, and fundraisers for the local school. Sunny Acres became a model community, known for its generosity and its commitment to helping others. Karen's downfall had been a catalyst for positive change. It had brought the community together, transforming Sunny Acres from a place of fear and control into a place of hope and opportunity. The happy clam, once a symbol of conflict, was now a symbol of unity and freedom. Sunny Acres, it seemed, was finally living up to its name. The sun was shining brighter than ever before. The lake called, and Mark would answer. Mark became a local hero. His story was featured in the local newspaper and on the evening news. People admired him for his courage, his determination, and his willingness to stand up to a bully. Children would wave to him as he drove down the street, and adults would stop him to shake his hand and thank him for what he had done. He was no longer just Mark, the computer programmer with the boat, he was Mark, the man who had saved Sunny Acres. He received letters and emails from people all over the city, praising him for his actions and sharing their own stories of standing up to injustice. He was amazed by the outpouring of support and encouragement. He even received a commendation from the local police department, recognizing his contribution to the investigation of Karen's crimes. The police chief personally thanked him for his help and presented him with a certificate of appreciation. Mark never sought out the attention, but he appreciated the recognition. He knew that his story had inspired others to stand up for what was right, and that was something he was proud of. He started volunteering his time at the local community center, helping people with their computer problems and teaching them how to use the internet. He also became an advocate for fair housing and consumer protection, fighting against unfair practices and helping people who had been victimized by scams and fraud. He used his newfound platform to speak out against bullying and injustice, encouraging people to stand up for themselves and for others. He shared his story at schools, churches, and community events, inspiring people of all ages to make a difference in their communities. He also became a mentor to young people, helping them to develop their leadership skills and to become active and engaged citizens. He taught them the importance of integrity, honesty, and compassion. Mark's life had been transformed by the events of the past few weeks. He had gone from being an ordinary computer programmer to being a local hero, an advocate for justice, and a role model for his community. He had found his purpose in life, and he was determined to make the most of it. The Happy Clam was not just a boat, it was a symbol of his transformation, a reminder of the power of courage, determination, and the unwavering pursuit of what is right. He was ready to continue his journey, sailing towards a brighter future. He even considered changing the name of his boat to Justice. Mark often reflected on the events that had unfolded. The story of the Happy Clam was more than just a tale of a stolen boat, it was a reminder of the importance of community, fairness, and standing up to injustice. He realized that Sunny Acres had only become a truly great place to live when the neighbors started working together, supporting each other, and fighting for what was right. It was the sense of community that had ultimately defeated Karen's tyranny and transformed the neighborhood into a place of hope and opportunity. He also learned that fairness was essential for a thriving community. Karen's arbitrary and unfair enforcement of the HOA rules had created a climate of fear and resentment. It was only when the rules were applied fairly and equitably that people began to trust each other and work together for the common good. But perhaps the most important lesson he learned was the importance of standing up to injustice. He knew that it wasn't always easy to challenge authority or to speak out against wrongdoing. But he also knew that silence in the face of injustice was a form of complicity. He was proud of himself for standing up to Karen, even when it meant putting himself at risk. He knew that his actions had inspired others to do the same, and that was something he would always cherish. He also realized that everyone had a responsibility to be a good citizen and to contribute to the well-being of their community. It wasn't enough to just follow the rules, people had to be actively involved in making their neighborhoods better places to live. Mark continued to volunteer his time, advocate for justice, and mentor young people. He knew that his work was far from over, but he was determined to make a difference in the world, one person, one community at a time. As he looked out at the lake, watching the Happy Clam bob gently in the water, he felt a sense of peace and contentment. He knew that he had done the right thing, and that he had helped to make the world a little bit better. The Happy Clam, a symbol of his journey, was a constant reminder of the power of community, fairness, and standing up to injustice. The lake, always there, offered a tranquil place to reflect. He smiled, knowing that the journey would continue, and that he was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. He learned that even a small boat can weather any storm, with the help of a strong community and a steadfast commitment to what is right. The end.